Jasmine rice. This is the rice that made Southeast Asia famous. Jasmine rice originates from central Thailand, and by the 1950s, Thailand was exporting it across the globe. But what makes jasmine rice actually special isn't just where it comes from, its chemistry. The grain produces a compound called 2-acetyl-1-pyrroline, the same molecule found in fresh bread and popcorn. That's where the floral, slightly nutty aroma comes from. When cooked, jasmine grains go soft and cling together just slightly, not clumpy but cohesive. That texture makes it the perfect base for Thai curries, Vietnamese stir-fries, and Cambodian rice dishes where the sauce needs something to grip onto. Unlike basmati, which stays dry and separate, jasmine is moist and tender. Here's the thing most people don't know: jasmine rice loses up to 80% of its signature aroma within 1 year of harvest. The jasmine rice sitting in your pantry right now is probably already halfway to flavorless. Fresh harvest jasmine rice is an entirely different experience. Basmati rice. Basmati comes from one of the most specific growing regions on Earth, the foothills of the Himalayas straddling northern India and Pakistan. Written records of this grain go back to 1766 AD. The soil composition, the glacier-fed irrigation water, the altitude, none of it can be replicated anywhere else. Attempts to grow basmati in the American South or in Australia have produced longer grains, yes, but never the same flavor profile. What makes basmati stand out is what happens after harvest. The grain is aged, sometimes for a full 2 years, to reduce moisture content and concentrate its nutty aroma. Then when it cooks, each grain elongates to nearly double its raw length. It stays completely separate, dry and fluffy. That's the opposite of jasmine. This is the rice of biryani, of Persian pilaf, of celebratory dishes across South Asia and the Middle East. India currently dominates global basmati exports, a $4.5 billion industry as of 2023. And true basmati by international food law can only be called basmati if it comes from that specific geographic belt. Everything else is just a long-grain imposter. Arborio rice. Now we move to Italy. Arborio rice comes from a small town in the Piedmont region called Arborio, and it became commercially significant in the 1940s. It is a short-grain rice, but what matters isn't the size, it's the starch structure. Arborio contains two distinct types of starch, a hard amylose core at the center and a thick layer of amylopectin on the outside. That outer starch dissolves slowly into whatever liquid you're cooking with, creating the famously creamy texture of a proper risotto. You cannot rush this process. Arborio rice demands 18 to 22 minutes of continuous stirring and gradual liquid absorption. Add the broth too fast and the starch releases incorrectly. Stop stirring and the grain sticks to the pan instead of releasing into the dish. The result, when done correctly, is a rice that is simultaneously creamy on the outside and slightly firm, what Italians call al dente, at the center. Risotto is so culturally embedded in northern Italy that it has been recognized as part of the country's intangible cultural heritage. This isn't just food, it's identity on a plate. Black rice, forbidden rice. For thousands of years, this rice was illegal, not metaphorically, actually illegal. In ancient China, black rice was cultivated exclusively for the emperor. Commoners caught eating it could be executed. The name forbidden rice is not marketing, it is history. Black rice gets its color from anthocyanins, the same pigment family found in blueberries and red cabbage. The bran layer of black rice is so dense with these compounds that gram for gram it contains more antioxidants than any other natural food source tested in controlled studies as of 2012. When you cook it, the water turns deep purple. The grain itself becomes a rich violet. The flavor is earthier and nuttier than white rice, with a slight chew from the intact bran. It's used today in grain bowls, Southeast Asian desserts, and high-end restaurant presentations. What was once reserved for royalty is now sold at Trader Joe's. History is strange. Sushi rice. Sushi rice is not a variety of rice. It is a preparation. The grain itself is Japanese short-grain rice, sometimes called japonica, grown primarily in Japan, California, and parts of Korea. What transforms it into sushi rice is a precise mixture of rice vinegar, salt, and sugar, folded into the hot cooked grain immediately after it comes off the heat. The technique was standardized during Japan's Edo period in the 1600s, when Tokyo street vendors needed rice that would stay fresh, pliable, and slightly tacky at room temperature without refrigeration. The vinegar lowers the pH of the grain, which slows bacterial growth and keeps the rice workable for hours. That slight stickiness is what allows a sushi chef to press it into a nigiri shape that holds together without falling apart, but still releases cleanly in the mouth. Getting this right is considered one of the most difficult skills in Japanese culinary tradition. At serious sushi restaurants in Tokyo, apprentices spend their first 2 to 3 years doing nothing but mastering rice, washing, water ratio, heat timing, and seasoning. They don't touch fish until the rice is perfect. In Japan, rice is not a side dish, it is the dish. Wild rice. Wild rice is not rice. Scientifically, it belongs to a completely different genus, Zizania, an aquatic grass native to the Great Lakes region of North America. The Ojibwe people, who call it manumin, have harvested it from shallow lakes by canoe for over 10,000 years. It is one of only two grains that are truly indigenous to North America, and in Minnesota it holds legal protected status as a culturally significant food source. Wild rice looks nothing like white rice. The grain is long, dark, almost black, and when it cooks it splits open to reveal a cream-colored interior with a snapping texture. The flavor is smoky and deeply nutty, more like a seed or a nut than a grain. Nutritionally, it is in a different class entirely, double the protein of white rice, triple the fiber, and nearly 30 times more antioxidants. Scientists tried for decades to domesticate and farm wild rice at scale. They didn't succeed until the 1950s. Before that, every grain ever eaten had to be harvested by hand from the wild, one canoe at a time. Parboiled rice, converted rice. Parboiled rice looks like regular white rice. It cooks like regular white rice, but it was engineered to be something significantly better. The technique works like this: before the rice is milled, the paddy grain still in its husk is soaked in water, pressurized with steam, and then dried. That pressure forces the nutrients from the outer bran layer deep into the starchy center of the grain. Then the husk is milled away. What you're left with is a white grain that retained roughly 80% of brown rice's nutritional value. The process is ancient. Versions of it have existed in South Asia for over 2,000 years. But the modern commercial version was developed in 1942 by a British inventor named Erich Husenlob, originally designed to keep rice nutritious during wartime military supply chains. An American businessman named Gordon Harwell licensed the process and launched it under the brand name Uncle Ben's, one of the most recognized food brands in American history, built entirely on a wartime grain technology. Today, parboiled rice accounts for roughly 50% of all rice consumed in South India and Sri Lanka. It also holds its shape perfectly when cooked, which is why it's the preferred rice in restaurant kitchens and large-scale food service operations worldwide. Glutinous rice, sticky rice. The stickiest rice on Earth gets its texture from a single molecular absence. Regular rice contains between 15 and 30% amylose starch, the starch that keeps grains separate and fluffy. Glutinous rice has almost zero amylose. What remains is almost entirely amylopectin, a starch that gelatinizes completely when heated, binding grains into a dense, cohesive, stretchy mass. Glutinous rice originated in Laos, which remains to this day the highest per capita consumer of sticky rice on the planet. Lao people eat it 3 times a day, hand-rolling small balls from the communal basket and using them to scoop up meat, vegetables, and fermented fish paste. The preparation method matters enormously. Glutinous rice must be soaked overnight and then steamed in a cone-shaped bamboo basket. Boiling it destroys the texture entirely. Across the region, this rice becomes mochi in Japan, tang yuan in China, bon in Vietnam, and mango sticky rice in Thailand. And then there is this. Ancient Chinese engineers mixed glutinous rice paste directly into the mortar used to build sections of the Great Wall of China. The sticky starch bound with the limestone to create a composite that was more water-resistant and more flexible than standard mortar. Some of those sections have survived for over 2,000 years. A grain of rice helped hold together one of the largest structures in human history.